Potatoes. Who does not like them? Widespread and versatile, it is no wonder that those tubers have become a staple food across the globe. But there is one potato that is most singular. The one tuber to root them all, as he would say in his own words. And his name is Tato. But before we talk about the spudliest of spuds, we must go back thousands of years into the past and head farther south to the Andes in current-day Peru, the time and place where potatoes first came to be. Roughly 7 millennia ago, the early humans of ancient Peru were threatened by a famine following a poor harvest. Times were dire, and sickness had started to spread. One fateful day, when farmers were cleaning their fields from dying crops, they came across strange, tuberous roots attached to the withered plants. Out of desperation, they ended up cooking and eating the tubers. Nourishing, revigorating tubers! It was a gift from the gods! The relieved mortals cheered, and turns out they were right. Much later, the Inca would give a name to this creator of potatoes, the goddess Axomama. Although, while potatoes were indeed created by a deity, the truth could not be more different. The true, uncredited creator of potatoes is a trickster god whose name has been erased for the longest time until much recently. His name is Pacsuquwi. Before he was a trickster god, he was a supaiku, a soul construct made in the image of their eponymous lord, the god of death, Supai. Supai was supposed to join the rest of the gods in Hananpacha, the upper realm, now that he had subordinates to aid him with his duties. They claimed that he could rule from the heavens and serve in the solar court, while his servants dealt with the rest. Not wanting to deal with the petty squabbles and intrigues of their court, however, the chthonic deity sent his most trustworthy subject instead to assume his position in the heavens. This subject was none other than Pacsuquwi. The gods above did not take kindly to Supai's decision, but in this matter, not even their leader, the almighty sun god Inti, had his say. Pacsuqui's presence was merely tolerated, and there was no way Inti would grant a lesser being such important responsibilities of representing the underworld, Ukupacha, in his court. Alas for him, the supaiku was left with too little work and too much time to kill. And so, he spent most of his days down in Kaipacha, the mortal realm, playing tricks on mortals to whom he took quite a liking. And then came the aforementioned famine. It bothered Pacsuquwi deeply to see the mortals in such distress, for the trickster god did not wish actual harm upon the humans, and knowing that the gods above would not lift even a finger until the mortals gave them offerings or sacrifices in their names, he took matters into his own hands. As a gift to humanity, and to stick it to the big man, Pacsuquwi did the unthinkable. A sacrifice to the mortals. He mutilated himself and carved from his own flesh and blood. He created potatoes for them. When words of his action came to the ears of the court, Inti was livid. But Pacsuquwi did not care, because thanks to this sacrifice, the early Peruvians had a better chance of survival. For his transgression, the sun god kicked the trickster god out of Hananpacha, and even proceeded to poison his gift as further punishment. Yes, this is why potato tubers are toxic and their plants are highly poisonous. But we all know that did not stop humanity in the least. Pacsuquwi knew that well after spending so much time in their company. Even better yet, potatoes ended up being more popular than Inti's own gift to humanity, maidze, the sacred grain, commonly known here as corn. In the end, the joke was on Inti and his ilk. Millennia passed, and civilization in Peru flourished. Now it was the Inca Empire that was ruling over the Andes. Amongst them, the trickster god Pacsuquwi in disguise kept playing tricks on the mortals as he always did. Inti, in a petty attempt to upset Pacsuquwi, gave the credits of creating potatoes to Axomama. It did not bother him nearly as much as he had hoped. What bothered him, truly, was that Axomama was still a child at the time she was appointed to the court. Does the god's pettiness know any bounds? He asked himself in disbelief. Unfortunately, Pacsuquwi did not understand the full extent of what a god can do out of sheer spite. And lo and behold, by a coincidence most suspicious, the Spaniards set foot on the shores of South America. It took 50 years for the conquistadors to eradicate the Inca Empire. Countless lives lost in brutal conquest. Pacsuquwi, as much as he wanted to interfere, was not allowed to, for even as a god he was still a supaiku, an extension of the god of death, and thus bound by the same rule. He could not cause himself the death of a mortal, as it would temper with their judgment in the afterlife. Out of desperation, Pacsuquwi escalated the tallest mountain of the Andes to try and resonate with the Solar Court. He pleaded to the gods to stop the conquistadors and save the Inca, who were supposedly under their protection. Inti, in response, taunted the trickster god. He claimed that it was himself who led the Spaniards to the Inca as retaliation for Pacsuquwi's transgressions, that their deaths were all on him. In truth, that was all a cruel lie. Now, the sun god was never a particularly good liar, but alas for the trickster, emotions got the better of his judgment. It was a trap, and he had taken the bait. For once, the trickster got tricked. The Solar Court echoed with the mocking laughter of Inti's entourage, impressed with their lord's show of wits. The gods cheered, with the exception of a few. Mamahuia, goddess of the moon, and Inti's wife, who was actually on good terms with Pacsuquwi and his maker, Supai. Axomama was not laughing either. In fact, she could feel even a fraction of what Pacsuquwi felt at this instant. Even though she was the goddess of potatoes, the spuds were still a part of him. And this fraction was enough to overwhelm the young goddess with a sense of impending doom. The mocking laughter made way for gasps of shock as a sonorous roar of the enraged trickster god echoed throughout Hanatpacha like violent thunder. The earth beneath his feet quaked. It was as if the mountains themselves quivered in fear of his wrath. The sky cried torrential rain, and the sun cowered behind dark clouds. Pacsuquwi only had one thing in mind: to beat the sun god within an inch of his life for leaving his own followers to be slaughtered. He could have gone back to Ukhupacha to let Supai know about all that had just occurred. He could have assisted his brethren with a sudden surge of souls flooding the lower realm. He could have asked for his Tio's support and returned to Hananpacha together to call out Inti for his cruelty and arrogance. He could have done all that and more yet. But the truth was that Pacsuquwi was seeing red in his fit of rage that consumed all but one thought. He was beyond reasoning. The Apu, guardian spirits of the mountains, keepers of the gateways to the realm above, did not even try to get in his way. A wise choice. The raging Supaiku clawed his way back to the upper realm with the fury of a frenzied beast. And then he was met by a small army steadily waiting for his arrival, all weapons drawn. They had no intention to put up a fair fight against Pacsuquwi, but the trickster god would be damned if he did not die in defiance. The Supaiku fought like a furious demon, but his defeat was inevitable. He was brought before Inti and the rest of the Solar Court by their high-ranking officers. He remained on his knees, bruised and bloodied, staring dead in the eyes of the sun in a deafening silence. If the trickster god thought that the sun was cruel, arrogant, and petty, the next demonstration would show all the true extent of Inti's capacities, as well as his intent. For it was all an elaborate setup to justify what would soon follow. Then and there, the sun god, emperor of emperors, Inti, started reciting a curse that he would unleash upon Pacsuquwi, to have his name erased from the memories of everyone, to be forgotten by all, including himself, as if he never even existed. A death sentence, perhaps a worse fate still, to any being whose name holds great power. Mamahuia, who was also the matron of magic, realized the gravity of what her husband was doing and would try to interrupt him. In vain. It was already too late. Once the curse was cast, all stood there in the middle of the courtyard, wondering why there was this wounded creature just kneeling there, angry and confused. Inti, as a caster of the curse, was perhaps the only being in the entire universe to bear any memory of this now nameless trickster. But he spared no further time with ceremonies. He had him shoved into an adamantine sarcophagus, closed it shut, then had it tossed down into the underrealm as a sacrifice to himself. Dying and falling down to the deepest, darkest trench of Ukhupacha, it would seem that the nameless trickster's fate was sealed, to fade into nothingness. But fate itself works in mysterious ways, and this was far from the end for this one.